Okay, we are up to the second to the last thing in the parak. Okay, unfortunately, we're not going to have class next week because it's Thanksgiving, but after that we have one more to go, and then we're done with the third parak, which is crazy. Okay, what do we call them? Disclaimer slash excuses. I prepared this on Shabbos, and I feel like we came up with ideas, but then I went over it again midweek, and I feel like I don't have any ideas. But if I felt like I had ideas on Shabbos, then there's a good chance that we'll get some ideas tonight. It is not easy. This one's not easy for a couple of reasons. So we'll lower expectations, and the worst that's going to happen is we're going to end up reviewing old ideas, okay, which is not a bad thing. But all right, so this is technically part of the same mishnah that we've been doing of if there's no flower, then there's no Torah. If there's no derech, vice versa. If there's no derech eretz, there's no Torah. Same person, Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah. Okay, so he says like this. Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah, Haya Omer, he would say, Kol shechachmaso meruba mima'asav lemahu dome. Anyone whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, or if you want to say his actions, but is meruba, meaning it's like numerically more. Lemahu dome. What is he comparable to? Le'ilan she'anafav merubin v'sharashav muatin. To a tree whose branches are numerous but whose roots are few. V'haruach ba'a v'okarto v'hofachto al panav. And a wind came and uprooted it and flipped it on its face, flipped it on its head. Hold on just a second here. I'm getting a weird Zoom announcement, or not announcement, alert, saying my volume is down. Okay, you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, I'm getting a little bit lag on seeing you. So if you're getting like lag from seeing me, let me know, and maybe we'll have to like restart this because this whole computer setup is not cooperating today. Okay. So anyway, a wind came and uprooted it and flipped it onto its face. Shneimar, as it says in Yirmiyahu, Dehaya ke'arar ba'arava. He will be like a lone tree in the desert. V'lo yirek yavotov, and he will not see when goodness comes. V'shachan charerim bamidbar, it dwells in a parched land in the wilderness. Eretz malecha v'lo in a salty, uninhabited land. I don't quite get salty land. I don't know if that is literally salty or if it just means like if it's a word for like arid, like it just can't grow there or whatever. Okay. Aval kol shemasa merubin mechachmasa, but anyone whose deeds exceed his chachma, l'mahudama, what is he comparable to? Ilan shanafa mu'atin v'shrasha merubin, to a tree whose branches are few and whose roots are many. Shafilu kol haruchos shaba'olam ba'os v'noshvos bo, that even if all the winds in the world come and blow it, in mezizin oso mimkoma, they cannot budge it from its place. Shneimar, as it says, v'hayak eitz shasu al mayim, it will be like a tree that's planted alongside with water. V'al yuval yishalach shorashav, and it will spread out its roots along a brook. V'lo yireh ki yavo chom, it will not fear. Hold on, this might be a mistake. I think there's a creek sieve in that pasuk, and I don't know if it's supposed to be yari or year. Okay, you know what? I'm going to go ahead. The English I trust here more than the Hebrew. We'll see the Hebrew later on. He will, he will not. Oh no, he will not see when heat comes. Oh, he will see. Okay, but he will not see when heat comes. Alehu ranan, and its foliage is ever fresh. Uvishnas batzoros lo yidag, and in a year of worry, a year of drought, it will not worry. Velo yamish mesos peri, will not cease producing fruit. Okay, so that's the mishnah. Now, I'm going to pretend that we've gone through all the facts, but we really haven't. I'm going to see if your questions lead to the need to see more facts. Okay, but let's just start off with questions and questions and problems. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in the chat just so you can have more easy access to it. Yeah, Tamar?
I mean, I kind of have like a general what is going on kind of question, but I could be a little bit more specific with some of the details.
Yeah, sure.
So like, for one thing, I guess what does it mean that the wisdom exceeds the deeds or the deeds exceed the wisdom? Because it sounds like one of these is better than the other, but like, is it like, oh, if a person had the same amount of deeds, they shouldn't have more wisdom? Like they shouldn't get more wisdom until their deeds catch up? Like what's the relationship?
Okay, great. So yeah, I actually like the way you're breaking this up in terms of general question and then specific. So what does it mean for wisdom to exceed deeds and vice versa? Okay, and we'll break that down into particular questions. So the question you're asking here, and I'm gonna go ahead and like leave it open for other people to break this down how they want, but I think this is what you're asking, which is like why do we well I guess why does the Tana seemingly only care about the relative amount of wisdom versus deeds rather than the absolute amount? Okay, and for example, like according to the plain shot, so let's pretend that we have like a score here. Okay, if I have 90 wisdom points and 30 deed points, that's worse than having 10 deed points and 3 wisdom points, right? That doesn't make sense, right? In other words, like it seems like having lots of wisdom is good, and that really we should, care about how much wisdom and how many deeds you actually have, not just like the comparison. Was that your question, or were you asking something else?
Yeah, my question was like, if you take it as a literal comparison, then yeah, you have this problem.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. All right. There are more sub questions here, but I'll add them as they're asked. Okay. Ayala, you're next.
So what specifically are these deeds?
Yeah. Okay. So what does ma'asav? What does deeds refer to in this context? And presumably, I mean, do you have any possibilities that like immediately light up?
They're like mitzvos.
Right. So let's say is it like mitzvos or broader than mitzvos? Okay. Let's just leave it at that for now. Yeah. Okay, good. Lauren?
Yeah, my question is about the psukim that he quotes, like how that supports his ideas.
Okay.
That he's saying, because it doesn't really seem like it fits, except
yeah, okay, good.
Fits. And then also even let's say like the general idea of like the first one, I'm just thinking like a tree in the desert is not falling over or dying, it's just sitting alone in the desert. Okay. So I don't
all right, good.
See the analogy.
All right, good. So that's what I was hoping someone would ask. Okay, so let me just talk this through a little bit more here. So in the mushal, he has 3 things. Okay, he has well, I guess 4 things: a tree with branches and roots and wind, and then the wind uproots it. Okay, arguably the wind and uprooting it are one thing. Okay, all right. So that's like, let's say like let's just be generous here. Okay, so the tree, the roots, the branches, and the wind. Okay. In the pasuk, you have the tree, okay, and it doesn't talk about its branches, it doesn't talk about its roots, and there's no wind, and it doesn't suffer like this fate, okay. And then with a good one, you also have the same 4 elements in the mashal, but then here you have the tree. You do have a mention of roots, but nothing about the number of branches. It just talks about the foliage, and it talks about fruit. So it's just like, it doesn't really line up, okay? And the reason why I was waiting till someone asked the question, and I was gonna debate about whether to reveal this later on. Basically what happened was on Shabbos, when I prepared this with Azaryah, this was our biggest question. And we looked through several of the meforshim, and they just weren't explaining it. They just weren't addressing the psukim. And then we saw, I forgot who it was. It's not gonna be one we go through tonight. But actually what I do want to be responsible and just quote this in the name of the person who said it, because Pirkei Avos said you should say something b'shem omro. It must have been Rבינו Bachya, because that's one that's not on all Torah. Hold on. Let's see here. Where are we? Yeah, so Rבינו Bachya. I'm going to go ahead and assume it's Rבינו Bachya. Let me just find it here and confirm. Or maybe it was a footnote. Hold on just 1 second here. Nope. Interesting. Oh, no, it was the Rashbats, but apparently the Rashbats, this part is not on the on the All Torah version, or I missed it. So I'll tell you what it says. Yeah, maybe it's in a different version of the Rashbats. Okay, anyway, so he says like this. He quotes the version of the Mishnah that we have, and he says, Kach hagirsa b'siduri hatfilos. This is the version of the text that is in the Sidurim. Now, I don't know like the details about this, but there's this minhag to recite Pirkei Avos at Mincha on Shabbos between some people do it between Pesach and Shavuos, and some people do it all the way through Rosh Hashanah. And so I guess historically Sidurim were printed with the Pirkei Avos in it. So he says that in the version in the Siddur, this is how it has it. Okay, but then he says about the Mishnayos, but in the actual manuscripts of the Mishnayos, Ein Sham Psukim Hanizkarim b'Mishnah. There are no Psukim mentioned in the Mishnah. So what I did was I looked back and I saw that the Rambam, his version of the Mishnah looks like this. Okay, so anyone whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, to what may he be compared? To a tree whose branches are numerous, but whose roots are few, and a wind came and uprooted it and flipped it on its face. But anyone whose deeds exceed his wisdom, to what may he be compared? To a tree whose branches are few, but whose roots are many, that even if all the winds of the world come and blow it, it will not budge from its place. Okay, and then once I saw that the Rambam says that, I noticed that, that's why Rבינו Yona doesn't explain the Psukim, because he didn't have it either. That's why the Meiri doesn't explain it, because he didn't have the Psukim either. So this is one of these like awkward positions to be in learning, especially for someone like me who cares about the authenticity of manuscripts. It's like, it seems pretty clear that the original version of the Mishnayos did not have the Psukim in Yirmiyahu. Okay, so on the one hand, I feel like that relieves me of the burden of explaining it and integrating it. On the other hand, there are Chachamim whose versions of Pirkei Avos have the Mishnah in Yirmiyahu, or have the Psukim in Yirmiyahu, and they do try to explain it. And the question is, how do I feel about that? In other words, I guess I don't know the people who are in the shiur tonight, but like my students in yeshiva are definitely used to me, going on rants about like the good version of the Rambam of the Mishnah Torah, and we take the Rambam's word seriously. And if the Rambam, there are times when like the bad editions of the Mishnah Torah have something that just wasn't written by the Rambam, like just some ignoramus put it in there, and can Chachamim come up with ideas that fit the words? Yeah, we have a lot of creative people, who are Chachamim, but is our goal to explain what happens to be in the text, or is it to explain what Rabbi Elazar ben Azaryah actually said? And if he didn't actually say this, part of me says like, okay, yeah, we could come up with stuff, but like we don't have to. And I'm interested in what he said. And if he Davka didn't try to bring these Psukim in Yirmiyahu, then like why are we bending over backwards to try to like explain it? If you thought he said it, then obviously you have a responsibility to try to understand it and to bend over backwards to make it make sense. But if we know that he didn't say this, then why are we doing that? So I guess what I'm going to do for the purposes of our shiur is when we read meforshim who don't talk about it, we'll assume that they had the Rambam's version. And if we walk away tonight without an understanding of the Psukim, then I'm not going to like feel bad about it, because apparently the original version didn't have it. And not only that, let's just use this as an opportunity to read the Psukim in context, and you'll point out what another problem is. Okay, here are the Psukim in context. And by the way, these are among my favorite Psukim in Yirmiyahu. Obviously not my two favorite Psukim in Yirmiyahu, but these are the quintessential Psukim about bitachon. So he says like this. I'm only going to read the Psukim in Hebrew that we didn't read yet, because oops, what just happened? Why did it make that large font? Did I accidentally click that? Uninhabited. Okay, fine. All right. Yirmiyahu says like this. Ko amar ad Hashem. This is in 17:5-10. Ko amar Hashem. Thus says Hashem. Arur hagever asher yiftach ba'adam v'sam basar's ro'o. Accursed is the man who trusts in people and makes flesh his strength. Umin Hashem yasur libo, and turns his heart away from Hashem. V'hayak okay, then we have our pasuk. He will be like a lone tree in the desert and will not see when goodness comes. It dwells in parched lands in the wilderness, in a salty uninhabited land. Baruch hagever asher yiftach b'Hashem. Blessed is the man who trusts in Hashem. V'hayat Hashem yiftacho. Then Hashem will be his security. He will be like a tree planted near water, which spreads out its roots along a brook and does not see when heat comes, whose foliage is ever fresh. It will not worry in a year of drought and will not stop producing fruit. Akov alev mikol va'anushu mi yeda'enu. The heart is most deceitful of all, and it is fragile. Who can know it? Ani Hashem choker lev ubochen klayos. I am Hashem, the one who discerns thoughts and they say plumb the feelings and test innermost thoughts. Oh, choker levu boken lav. So yeah, it's two phrases. So I investigate hearts and plumb the thoughts. V'laseis liish kidrachav u'prima alalav. And I give to each man the fruit of his way, according to his ways, and the fruit of his deeds. So now that you see the psukim in context, I feel like that should, it should bring up another question on our mishnah, assuming that this is in the mishnah. What do you see? What do you see the problem is here? Yeah, Tamar.
Maybe it's just about a different topic.
Mm-hmm. Completely different topic, right? This is about people who trust in man versus people who trust in Hashem, whereas our Mishnah is about chachma and actions versus, what's more numerous. So, like, not only does the original version of the Mishnah not have this, according to the authoritative manuscripts, but the topic is completely unrelated and the mashal doesn't line up. Okay, so I'm fine. I'll refer to Gersh Pincus's the method he jokingly uses is the tear it out method. I said, Gersh, what's the tear it out method? He said, doesn't make sense, tear it out. But here it's like we find out a version where it was never inserted. Okay. So for our purposes, we will functionally ignore these psukim here. And then if we are curious, then we'll see meforshim who have it. Okay, but let's simplify it here. Okay, sorry to keep you on waiting. Alex, you're next.
I don't know if it's necessarily a question, but it feels like the metaphor isn't very intuitive because something like wisdom is more internal. So you would expect that to be the roots, whereas deeds are something very observable, much like branches. Okay, so let's say I'm going to go ahead and shunt this the psukim question to the bottom. Actually, I won't even number it. I'll keep it here, and I'll add this in here, which is that the subject in the psukim is not the same subject as our mishnah, and almost none of the elements line up in the manner of the mishnah. Okay, so there's Alex's question, which is why is chachma compared actually I'm going to type in English because my Hebrew switching is not working so well tonight. Why is wisdom compared to the branches and deeds compared to the roots? Okay, shouldn't it be the other way? So the way Alex said it is like wisdom is really like beneath the surface, whereas deeds are external, right? That's what you're saying, Alex, when you meant underneath? Yeah, it just doesn't seem like an intuitive metaphor for what they're trying to say.
Right, this isn't intuitive. Okay, good. Okay, Vanessa?
This might be a subset question too, and I apologize, I'm sick, so my logic might be left out.
Okay, that's fine. I'm tired and my logic is also not working.
Great. I understand how wisdom can exceed deeds, but what does it mean? We can say that it's quantitative, like someone who does many deeds who doesn't have a lot of wisdom, like a simpleton who puts on tefillin every day. Like I understand that way, but like, is there another way to explain what deeds exceeding wisdom does? Because I don't actually understand that. Like, okay,
good. So I'm going to put this as a sub question, under 2, like you said, which is actually this is more this question has to come first, I think, which is how exactly is this measured? Okay, like isn't this like saying anyone whose IQ exceeds his annual donations, right? Like it's apples and oranges, right?
Right.
It's apples and oranges. So how is each variable assessed, and how are they compared when they're two fundamentally different things? Yeah.
Is that my question? I'm very slow today. I'm sorry.
No,
I don't know if that's my question. I think that's a good question.
Okay, no, I thought your question was. Say your question again. Maybe I'll.
I'm trying to understand. I understand that wisdom can exceed deeds. Like you could know a law, but like not necessarily act on it.
Okay.
But how can you do more than you understand? Everything you do, you have to understand on some level, unless you're like literally insane. But I don't think the Mishnah is talking about something like.
Okay.
That's my question. Like,
okay. All right. So that's
like, I understand it. The answer to that could be that it's literally quantitative. Like literally, it's a simpleton who doesn't know Torah, but he knows that tefillin is a thing, and he puts it on each day. Fine. but that's
Oh,
like, but that's
okay.
just like, that's not like compelling, you know, like that's not.
Oh, okay,
that's
good.
not
So
something we're learning from that.
you'll be pleased to know that even in your sickness-addled mind, the question that you asked is okay. Well, this is kind of like a spoiler alert here. Rבינו Yona gives two interpretations of our Mishnah, and then he says, "But this doesn't make sense because," and then he says your question, and then he gives your answer, but he explains it. Okay,
Okay.
so your intuition is actually very much on the right track. Okay, so I'm
That's
just gonna
awesome.
type this as a separate question here. Okay, so and if they are like compared in terms of, you know, like, sorry, and if I'll just use the one that you're talking about. If wisdom exceeds deeds means that you know more than you're doing, then how can deeds possibly exceed wisdom? Don't you need to know what you're doing? So isn't wisdom always going to be like, I guess, somewhat commensurate with deeds? Yeah, something like that. Okay, yeah, good. Well, Rבינו asked it in a good way. Yeah, Lauren.
I guess I've been thinking about like the last mission we did, and I'm wondering why having more than one, like why is it better that than deeds is better? Like it's better to have more deeds than wisdom than more wisdom than deeds. Like I feel like why can't it just be equal?
Okay.
The goal. I don't
Yeah,
know.
can you just explain a little bit more what you were what connection you're making to the previous?
I guess because like the last mission was saying how like both of them are interdependent. Like if you have this but without this,
Mhm.
then you
Okay.
don't have this one without this one. So I was thinking like
Okay.
maybe they're both interdependent, sense that like wisdom and deeds are both important, and they kind of like
Right. Okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask this in a very general way to start off with is how does this statement of Elazar ben Azaryah, right? Elazar ben Azaryah, Azaryah jive with his previous statement. Okay, his previous statement was all about how both things are important and interdependent, and now he's throwing us he's giving us an example of an asymmetrical like relationship between two phenomena. Okay, so what makes this different from the previous pairings? Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. I didn't think of that. Yeah, Ayala.
Okay, two-part question. First is on this, I guess the wind coming and uprooting it and flipping on its face.
Yeah.
So what exactly is like the nimshal for that? Like
Yeah.
I don't think it means it flips the person. So like
Okay, yeah.
what
Right.
happens?
So let's see here. Yeah. Let us ask. You know what? Let me do. I want just to broaden this here. This is kind of okay. I think I want to make this into one question about like what is the mashal and the nimshal, and then we'll just ask a question for each part. So, what is the mashal? Hebrew is not mashal, and the nimshal.
I'm sorry. Can you translate nimshal?
Yeah,
I should know that.
there's no translation of nimshal.
Great, cool.
The mashal is the metaphor. Sorry, not megaphor. The metaphor, and then nimshal is that which is signified by the metaphor. And if there's anyone who knows like the one English word,
That's totally helpful.
Yeah.
The subject. That's got it. That's all I needed.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just wish that there was like a single
A word for it.
Yeah. So now, so the sub questions here are, and again, this is partially covered by this sub question I have here, which is what is, sorry, how is wisdom a metaphor for branches? How are deeds a metaphor for roots? Or sorry, the other way around. How are branches a metaphor for wisdom? And then how are roots a metaphor for deeds, okay, then what is the wind and flipping and uprooting the tree a metaphor for? And I'm treating that as one metaphor. I don't think it's like wind is one thing. I guess, yeah, uprooting, I guess, or not uprooting. Yeah, I think there's like three components here. Okay, so where's that a metaphor for? Yeah, okay, good. That was Ayala?
I had a second half of that
Yeah,
question,
sure. Second half of your question,
which is just like, how does this work, practically speaking?
Right. I mean the whole thing.
Yeah, that like if you have more deeds, or if you don't have more, if you have more wisdom than deeds, it'll like get flipped over. Like, why is that the case?
Okay, yeah, okay, so I also had that same question, but I have I don't want to make a sub question of the sub question here, but how does the like wind uprooting the tree work in the nimshal? Okay, and what I want to ask here is, like, it seems to imply that just like a top-heavy tree is, just like a top-heavy canopy. Do you call the top of a tree a canopy in every case, or is that only if it's like, I don't know, I'm gonna call it a canopy. Just like a top-heavy canopy is a liability because of the wind resistance. Oh, okay, wind resistance is going to be a confusing term because resisting the wind is good in the nimshal. So because of the
susceptibility,
blowoverability. Okay, new word here. Blowable overability. Yeah. Okay. So too, the wisdom is being depicted as a liability, right? Is that true? Right? Like, in other words, isn't more wisdom going to ground you even more? And that kind of is interconnected with the question about that Tamara was asking about, like, you know, it seems like the absolute amount of wisdom does matter. So shouldn't that factor in as well? Like, let's say you have lots of branches, but a really strong root system. So like maybe the strong root system is going to like keep the tree from falling over, you know, like it's just, it doesn't quite make sense about how this, you know, this seems to imply something negative about chokhmah that is not clear how that works out in practice. So how does it work? Okay, good. Tamar?
Okay, so my question is also on this wind mashal neutral.
Yeah.
In the mashal, it's like it's a single event, like the tree is existing and then this happens.
Yeah.
Falls over. And I guess my question is that part of the nimshal also? Like, is it a sudden event? Like,
right.
Like, I don't know, the person's having a crisis or something.
Okay, right. So I'm gonna say, is this a single event? And if so, what is that event? Okay, and then moreover, it seems, etc. Okay. What else? I guess we should ask our usual questions here, which is who is the intended audience? Is this exclusively for the chassid in training, or is this for everyone on their level? And then, like, practically speaking, how do we implement this? Oh, you know, actually, this is part of my question here about how is it measured. How is this measured? Like, how do we know where we stand? Okay, so in other words, if there are certain times when we talk about things being measured and we can't know how we stand. Let's say like on Yom Kippur, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, then God weighs your zechuyos and your avonos, and we say we can't know, and like, that's it. We just have to like, trust God's judgment or whatever. Here, this is a practical text. So how do I go about discerning whether my wisdom outnumbers my deeds or not? And like, and so practically speaking, like what am I supposed to do about this? How do I rectify this? Yeah. Okay. This might not be all the questions, but let me copy and paste these into the chat so you can consult them as you wish. And then let's try to answer this on our own. And then I'm going to disappoint all of you in the same way that I was disappointed. Okay, hold on. Oh, it's too long still. Why can't Zoom get its act together? Okay, hold on. Oh. Clicking all over the place today. Okay, let's try this again. All right, question 3 will be its own post. Okay, and questions 4 through 6. Okay, Vanessa, you have answer or you have more question?
An answer.
Okay,
maybe.
good.
Okay, everyone's saying that the branches being wisdom and the roots being I'm sorry, I'm really not great today.
That's
Deeds.
okay.
Whenever I've read this mishnah, I totally think it makes sense. Everyone else says it's opposite. I don't think it's opposite. The way I read it, wisdom, and it's hard because wisdom means a specific thing, and we're gonna get caught up in the language. But when I read it just plain, and what I first think about is, imagine like a philosopher, maybe even think about it outside of Torah, because I think that's a little easier to like conceptualize.
Yeah.
Like someone who's like totally rooted into philosophy, but it doesn't affect his day-to-day life. Like this this college freshman who's like super into Aristotle, man, and like he reads it all day long, but he's not actually implementing any of the things.
Yeah.
Versus like a simple person who's like, but putting on tefillin each day and like really talking to Hashem and like really like saying, you're gonna build a much stronger foundation through actions, because the way I understand our Jewish practice is that we are people of action, right? Like we have these mitzvot and like we have these like funny little, like on Sukkot we have the funny looking lulav and intro because we need a physical manifestation of the thoughts we have.
Yeah.
If you're not materializing what you're learning and internalizing like through all your Torah study or whatever you're doing, you're not actually learning anything. Like it doesn't, it's not good for anything if you're not doing an action. So if you're just collecting all these thoughts and you're this like quasi, it's hard to think of a Jew who has a lot of wisdom who's not doing deeds, because that's like they do kind of go hand in hand. But like it does exist like a Jew who like just thinks and like can talk about Gemara all day long, but like the second his faith is tested and he just gets into like an intellectual argument with like someone else, it gets uprooted if he doesn't have the true deeds and like the commitment to it, like side of it.
Okay, good. So you know, the I'm gonna kind of withhold from commenting on that now, because I think 2 or 3 of the meforshim we do are gonna say different aspects of what you're saying. But I think it's good intuition. I do want to read something though, which is okay. I don't know who this person is, but okay. So wait, there are many of you who know Rabbi Aaron Zimmer, and his English name is Eric Zimmer. So I saw this thing that I sent to him, which is a quote from someone named Eric Zimmer. I don't know who that is. That says, you can't think your way into right action, but you can act your way into right thinking. And I thought that was a great summary of like how the Torah's approach is, like exactly like you're saying, is like the Torah, obviously, you know, the Torah is very big on learning, but the approach is you start off being grounded in the actions, and then that creates like a foundation that is filled in with thinking afterwards, or like leads to thinking, you know, you don't try to create the actions through the thinking. So that
was such a more salient way of putting what I was trying to say.
No, it's the same. You got the idea though, and you know, not everyone can have pithy quotes like this Eric Zimmer, whoever that is. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So holding your thought, we will go more into depth on that when we look at the meforshim. But good thinking. Okay, Tamar.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna just be agreeing with Vanessa, but I want to say another thing in the same direction, which was because I think we have a lot of problems with like this exceeding.
Yeah.
I think you could try and give an answer like the exceeding is not quantitative, but it's a relationship, right? Like that's I think the type of answer
Okay,
that
that's good. Yeah.
That the wisdom exceeding the deeds is some sort of relationship between the wisdom and the deeds that's not stable, and the other way is stable.
Right. Okay, good. So I will give you an example of where Chazal used that. I actually don't know who says this or where it's found, but there's a Gemara that says, oh, actually, you know what? Hold on. I think I quoted it, but it might not be in my WhatsApp messages. Let me just check. Yeah, I got it. Okay, good. But do I have a source? Yeah, Gittin Daf Samach Amud Beis. That is, I'm not going to read it. I'm just going to say it. Is there's a machlokes about whether the majority of Torah is in writing or is bal peh, is like oral. So that is a similar problem here. It doesn't make sense because, I mean, now we have written down Torah bal peh, but like Torah bal peh was not written. So it'd be like, what are you going to do? Count the number of psukim in the Chumash and compare that to the number of ideas in Torah bal peh? But like that doesn't make sense. So Rabbi Fox in an article explained it that the machlokes, when it says which one is the majority, it means which one is like the essence and which one is like the accompaniment to it. So here we're also talking about a qualitative relationship, but it's being expressed metaphorically in terms of a quantitative like excess. So I think that's a good way to answer that question. And Tamara, you're not saying what the nature of that relationship is, right?
No, I'm not saying
Okay.
that.
All right, that's good. All right. Yeah, Vanessa?
I don't know if this is going to make sense. I asked a question earlier, how do deeds exceed wisdom, like quantitatively? And I remember one place where we definitely did that, which was like R Chanina, when we said Nasa V'nishma, like, we'll do, and then we'll listen. I think that's what it might be getting at. Like, you don't need to understand to know. There's a difference between like chachma and just like knowing that Hashem wants you to do it. Like, you don't have to understand what all the mitzvot of tefillin to put it on, right? That's like the Chabad's whole shtick. I don't mind tefillin, my go-to example, but like, because it's so grounding, and it's like I like grew up watching my dad do it every single day, and like that's like a very grounding thing.
Yeah.
But you don't have to understand the whole thing of like you're saying Shema and understanding God's unity and like He brought us out of Mitzrayim. Like, you don't need to understand all that to put on tefillin and to know that God wants you to do it.
Right. Okay, good. So let's segue from here into what you're remembering. Okay, and I'm gonna list another question, and then you'll see why. You'll see why I was worried that we might be disappointed tonight or might review ideas tonight. So far, I'm not disappointed. Okay, so the question is, what does this statement add that we don't already know? So the obstacle that Isaiah and I came to, Ayala, I'll take your question first. No, okay. So the obstacle Isaiah and I came to time and again was, I only listed a couple examples here. So the Rama on our Mishnah says, Kavar Pirash Inin Ela Devarim Bezeh Perek B'Divrei Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. We've already explained these statements in this chapter on the words of Rabbi Chanina. Oh, he says Chananya. That's interesting. Chanina ben Dosa. So if you look back earlier this year, we did this Mishnah. We're doing right now 3:19. This is 3:11 and 12. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa Omer Kol Shiur Cheto Kodems LaChachmaso Chachmas Miskayemes V'Chol Shachachmaso Kodems LaYiras Cheto Ein Chachmaso Miskayemes. Anyone whose fear of sin precedes his chachma will endure. Anyone whose wisdom precedes his fear of sin, his wisdom will not endure. And then he would also say, Omer Kol Shemasa Merubim Chachmaso Chachmas Miskayemes. Anyone whose deeds exceed their wisdom, then his wisdom will endure. Anyone whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, his wisdom will not endure. So Rambam says that. He says, yeah, we already explained this. Rבינו Yona says, we already explained the statement in the chapter, anyone whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom. And many people just say, yeah, we already explained this. So the question is like if this is what this concept was already covered earlier in the chapter by Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, then why do we need this at all? Now, obviously, the answer is going to lie in the metaphor, right? But still, the question is then delete the other statement. Why is do we really need to dedicate a whole new mishnah to this with many words? So that's another question, and that's, by the way, what Vanessa is remembering. She's remembering our shiur on this mishnah, which I'll show in a second because it's the whole Nasa and Minishma thing that she just quoted. Yeah, Tamar.
So when the Rambam and Rבינו Yona say this,
yeah,
do they hold that it's literally like a redundant mishnah, or it doesn't mean that that's what they hold?
So that's the thing. It's like you never know when. It reminds me of like when my favorite thing is when one of the meforshim, like we get this from time to time in my mishnah shiurim, the Meiri will comment and the only thing he'll say is this pasuk is obvious, and like what's the hava amina that it's not obvious, and like you clearly felt the need to say something. There is such a thing as just not comment, So like, is the Rambam saying this because he wants to refute a hava amina that there is new interpretation or new ideas here. But then if that's why he's saying it, then like the question then is on the Tana. Well, then why is he, so it's hard to know like what to do with a statement like this, like, is there a nuance here that the Rambam is acknowledging, but he doesn't feel it's important enough to tell us? I just don't know what to make of it. Yeah, Tamar?
Which is maybe just a half idea of just kind of positing that maybe the Rambam, even if he doesn't hold that they're literally the same, or that maybe the context matters or something, that he doesn't have a new parish to say. Like that could be something different than saying it's the same mishnah.
That's true. Right. That's true. I mean, it might be saying that like everything that I needed to say, I said already in that other one. And like there might be a new idea here, but I'm not going to explain anything, and that would be consistent with what he says in the in his introduction to his commentary on Pirkei Avos. He does kind of indicate that there's going to be somewhat of like a need to know basis, that he's not going to elaborate on things that he spells out elsewhere, so that would fit with that. Okay, now before we review what the Rambam says, Ayala, did you have a question or a comment? No? Okay.
Sorry, could we, I think I just came late. Could you put the mishnah in the chat, please?
Yes, I did earlier, but you did come late, so I will put it again.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm gonna put I'll put the Rambam's version, okay, because that's the one without the
That's totally fine. Thank you.
Let's see. Okay, all right. So here is what the Rambam. Now here's the other weird thing. The Rambam says he explained this in this other mishnah, okay. But in this other mishnah, the part that corresponds to our mishnah is the second statement, which is anyone whose actions, whose deeds outweigh his chachma. But the Rambam only explains the first statement in his commentary there, which leads me to believe that he holds that even these two statements are like related enough that he could just give one explanation and it'll cover everything. Yeah, Vanessa?
I wonder if the difference is, because when we learned this, the R Chanina ben Dosa mishnah, I don't think we talked about outside pressure. I think we talked about like internal, like it'll just degrade.
That's
like
true.
Not living a committed Jewish life.
Okay, good. All right,
Okay.
that is a new element. That would be a new element. Okay, that's very good. And that would also fit in with what Tamar is saying, which is that like the main thing here is explaining what deeds are and what wisdom is and how they interact with one another. But once you have that, you can figure out the win part on your own, and the Rambam doesn't need to explain that. Okay, good. So let's go with what the Rambam said, and then we will we'll go back and see what the if we can figure out the external pressure thing. Okay, so the Rambam here said, I'm just going to read this in English for the sake of time. This principle is agreed upon by the philosophers, that habituating yourself in good midos. So this is Rambam explaining anyone whose fear of sin precedes his chachma. So he seems to be saying yiras chet is good character traits. If that comes before wisdom to the point where you have a strong disposition and you learn wisdom afterwards, the wisdom will motivate you towards those same goods. Then this will increase your attachment to wisdom and love of it and a yearning to increase it, because the wisdom is motivating you towards that to which you were already accustomed. But if you start off with bad midos and then learn afterwards, and your wisdom becomes that which withholds you from your desires that you were habituated in, then the wisdom will weigh heavily upon you and you will abandon it. Let me just see if there's one more thing I wanted to have here. No, because Rבינו Yona also summarized the Rambam, but I guess I didn't include that in this document. Yeah, so that's fear of sin. Okay, and I don't think it's a big leap to say that there's fear of sin, which is your midos, then there's actions, which is your actions, okay, which is your behavior, and then there's your chachma. Okay, so let's take an example, and I might have even used this example last time. Okay, let's say you grow up in a household where you don't speak lashon hara, and where whenever someone starts speaking lashon hara, then like they are societally frowned upon in that household. Okay, so you habituate yourself in good midos, you practice the behavior of refraining from saying lashon hara, and then let's say like you are a teenager or a young adult and you start learning the halachos of lashon hara. It's going to be very easy for you to learn those halachos, because the halachos will not create resistance to what you're doing. In fact, they're going to encourage you to what you're already doing, and your identity is going to encourage you to keep on like advancing your chachma. But if you grew up in a household where people are always like speaking lashon hara about one another, and you don't practice it, and then now it comes time to learn about the halachos of lashon hara, the chachma that you learn is going to be actively like creating friction with what your behaviors are. And as we know, whenever there's cognitive dissonance, then the behaviors and the habits win out, and the ideas fall by the wayside. So what's true of like good midos in general is true of all. What's true of lashon hara is true of all good midos and all good behaviors. And I think this is part of what Vanessa was saying, is like getting yourself into the habit of doing the ma'aseh mitzvos, doing the actions of the mitzvos. is going to mean that when it comes time to learn the halachos, you're not going to feel oppressed by your chachma, and you're going to keep on learning it. Whereas if you just didn't keep it at all, and then you learn, the learning is going to have to like drag you out of your habits into new habits, and that's a losing battle. Okay, so any questions on that idea before we get to our wind? Okay, so now going back to our Mishnah, we notice now that there are two new elements. There's three new elements. There's the roots, there's the branches, and then there's the wind. So can we take that idea from the Rambam and like get whatever nuance that R Elazar ben Azaryah is conveying to us? And I agree with Vanessa's thing that the external pressure is the wind, but we need to know what the nature of that external pressure is. And I think my question about the chachma seeming like a liability is another integral part of the mashal, because that's how it works. Is if you have, let's say, like you'll notice that palm trees have very strong root systems and very few. I'm talking about like Hawaii palm trees. I don't know what Israel date palms look like, but very, very few branches up there, and they're very wind resistant. They just, like Bruce Lee's, bamboo just bends with the wind. But an oak can get uprooted because it's very, very top heavy. I think the wind part is easy. I'll throw that out if anyone wants to say it. Okay, so I think that if in the previous Mishnah, or sorry, in Chanina ben Dosa, we're saying that if your chachma is running counter to your actions, then it's going to create friction and your actions are going to win. So all the more so if you're facing external pressure, right? Whether that is like, let's just take peer pressure because that's the most common example. Like the people in your society are not keeping mitzvos, or they're actively, advocating actions or values that go against like the mitzvos that you're practicing. So if you have a very strong adherence to the halacha or a very strong habit, so then those people won't budge you, But if you don't have that strong habit, then you're subject to being influenced. But now the question we have to ask here is, how does the chachma being more than your actions make the chachma into an actual liability? As opposed to just like not putting up resistance. Yeah.
Can you scroll back down to the
questions?
Yeah.
No, I put them in the chat, by the way. Oh, the commentary? Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot who gave it. I'm sorry. I'm really out.
I'll put that in the commentary also. Yeah, Ella?
Maybe because once you already like have the chachma and then it's like pushed away and like you reject it kind of for whatever other reason, like then you're like actively going against it kind of, and then once you like specifically are actively like rejecting it, then like it's harder to bring, like it's not going to be able to like be brought back, as opposed to like if it was never there in the first place, you're not going to specifically like have negative like associations with it.
Okay, that's a good idea. Let me just think about it for 1 second. This actually might go with something that we learned in Mishlei this morning. I'm not going to bring in the Mishlei from this morning. So let me give you an example of this, right? Is let's say let's take the Shabbos example, okay? Let's say you have someone who does not keep Shabbos, okay? And then they learn intellectual reasons for keeping Shabbos, okay? But then because their habits are not in line with that, then let's say they go to a college, go away for college, and like no one around them is keeping Shabbos, and they then reject the chachma. They find reasons why, like, oh, this is backwards, or like, I don't need to do this or whatever. And then now that chachma is like tainted, like that chachma is like invalidated, and now nothing can really like bring it back. But if the core reason why you keep Shabbos is the dedication to the behavior, the commitment to the system, and the chachma is just like, I don't want to reduce the chachma to icing on top, but like it's just furthering your commitment, so then your behaviors aren't going to be contingent on those ideas. All right, tomorrow I wanted to comment on what I'm saying.
I'm just reminded of I should probably find it as interesting. It was like something I read that was about specifically hearing bad versions of certain arguments will like ruin it.
That's interesting.
Like
Yeah.
if people present, I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's say, I don't know, let's say you hear like a cheap version of Torah Sinai or something, then you're
I was
just
just
kind of
gonna
like
give that example,
after
right?
that. What is
Yeah.
that?
Have I given that example here before?
Oh, I don't know, maybe you have, yeah.
Yeah, that I once heard someone said, what's the argument of Torah Sinai? And this one girl, I think this was in high school, said, yeah, it basically says if a bunch of people believe something, then it must be true. And I was like, that is totally the opposite, like that's a horrible, but yeah. That's it. Yeah, if you find that article, post it in the chat. Lauren.
Yeah, I think I want to say something similar, but I feel like sometimes with wisdom, it's using your mind, and your mind is also like really complex and could distort things. And sometimes you may think you understand it, but you don't understand it. And I feel like sometimes you could take wisdom and turn it against the Torah, like use different tools of philosophy, and then like turn it against it. You know what I mean? But if you're rooted in, and so in that sense, if that's what roots you to the ground and roots you to Judaism, then it could get turned over because you could turn it against itself. But if your basis is in deeds, then it doesn't even matter the wisdom that comes to you, because you know that you have to do these deeds. I guess it's
right. Okay, good.
I don't know if it's blind faith, but it's kind of like you do, like it's not blind faith, but you do have this humility that like my wisdom isn't necessarily like the end all and be all. I have trust that there's like a greater wisdom that I might not understand.
Yeah. Okay, good. I like that idea as well. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Tamar?
I think I'm just saying more things in the same
Sure.
vein.
I also have something to say that's in the same vein. Yeah.
Okay, but I think also this, I feel like, is something that you see. Sometimes you have people who are really, this is similar to Lauren's thing, people who are really smart, so they can win a lot of arguments, and maybe they know all the facts and all the arguments already. Then like it's very hard for them to be convinced by someone else because they can out argue them,
Okay, yeah.
So like yeah. I was just gonna say, once you have a moment, let's say you have some external pressure or a strong emotion or something that drives you away from, let's say, keeping Torah, then like how is anyone going to help you at that point? How are you going to help yourself?
Okay, right. So that's the direction I was taking, and the reason I was taking that direction, I'll call you afterwards, Vanessa. The reason I was taking that direction is because I think it fits in most with the Rambam's explanation for Chanina ben Dosa's statement, because there we're talking about basically, the cognitive dissonance, and the way that the cognitive dissonance is going to resolve is when you reject your chachma. And you're going to reject your chachma. If you're a fool, you're just going to reject the chachma outright. But if you're someone who is in our mishnah, whose chachma is greater than his deeds, who's like leading with the chachma, you're going to rationalize. You're going to manipulate or craft your chachma to fit your behavior, and no one's going to be able to out argue you. Like in other words, in our mishnah, the person whose chachma exceeds his deeds is a certain type of mind where like he is used to leading with his mind and like having that be the overt basis for everything. So if he wants to use that to rationalize his bad behavior, then like nothing is going to be able to argue him from that. So I think that fits into the Rambam. Yeah, Vanessa.
I think I'm just saying the same thing everyone else says at this point. I was like remembering a specific example from college.
Yeah, give an example.
Like there was this guy I know who like, I don't know what he's doing now. I don't want to like, hopefully this is like not true anymore, but like in college he was like known as this, like he had his own table in the Beit Midrash, like he was constantly there, constantly learning, constantly talking about Torah, but like also like with a weird slant, and you could just tell that he was like very intellectual, and like he would talk about like God in a way that like didn't actually fit the Torah model, and it like felt kind of weird, but also he was so knowledgeable and so smart and so holy, and like a lot of the time was constantly davening, all these things, and like now, like just from what he posts on Facebook, like he doesn't keep Shabbos, he like completely like fell off the derech, and like I hope he's come back, but like, and I think this like also came in with like, I think his like wind was like he was like in a terror attack in Israel a few years ago, but like like things have, point being like if your goal is keeping Torah, that's one thing, but if your goal is like intellectual stimulation for its own sake and like just asking questions and like trying to make it fit your own worldview, you're not, all the shuckling in the world isn't gonna keep you, you know what I mean? Like, and like God, like it wasn't an outward thing, like he really truly was like striving intellectually, but it wasn't rooted in like this deep sense of like, I want to keep what Hashem wants and then figure out what that means afterwards. Like I want to figure out and then keep. And it's
yeah, okay, good. That's good. That is a great sad example, but it's a good example. I want to go back to something that Tamara was saying as well, which is that going back to my question of this seems to be like saying that Chachma is a liability, and like if you have the 90 wisdom points and 30 deed points versus 10 deed points and 3 wisdom points. So I think the answer is yes. This is not saying you shouldn't pursue Chachma, but it is saying that Chachma is a liability. And in fact, like one of the phrases that Chazal use about like halachic geniuses is that they can find 49 ways to be matahir asheres. So like say that a non-kosher creature is like kosher, which means that you have to have a certain amount of like very like creative intellectuality. And is that a good thing? Yeah, if you're using it for the good, then it's a good thing. But if you're using it for the bad, then it's a liability. So I think like that's part of the nature of Chachma, that when Chachma is in service of God, it makes you a better servant of God. But when it's in service of your desires, it is way worse than someone who doesn't have the Chachma. Does that mean you shouldn't pursue Chachma? Obviously not. You should pursue Chachma, but it is a liability for the reasons we're saying. Yeah, Ayala?
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure like where this is in, and it's not really a fully developed idea either.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, like, what is Chachma here? And I think that like in the way we're talking about it, to me it seems like a almost like intangible thing that like we sometimes, this is reminding me of like also mishnah share, I think from last week morning, but like this like false idea that like Chachma is a thing and like the mind is like separate from the body kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like Chachma, maybe, I don't really know, I'm speculating, is like what happens to be on our mind and what happens to be our like thought processes in the moment.
Yeah.
I think I remember with Pesach once in his like intro to Chelek Shirim discussed this, that it's kind of like an action instead of like not an action, but like an activity, not like a set thing which you have.
All right, that's a really intriguing model. I mean, it definitely rings true to me, but it's such a radically different model. You're right; it's radically different than the way that we're talking about it. I got to sit on that one for a while. I think it is good. I mean, it almost reminds me of that the first mishnah that I taught you guys in Lomdeha of you don't believe in yourself until the day you die. That the fallacy is to think that you have some sort of like unchanging essential core that is the real you, but in reality, you are the sum total of your decisions that you're making from day to day. Same thing with like your chachma is how you're exercising your mind, not some static thing. And that's why you have statements of Chazal to say like, if you leave the Torah one day, then it leaves you 2 days. It's not like you've got like this jar of marbles and like chachma is like adding to the jar and like nothing ever changes the quantity of the marbles. Yeah. Going back to part of what you said about how like it, there's a certain mistake to like treat your chachma as a separate thing from like your psyche or who you are. I do think it's interesting that the chachma and the actions are portrayed here as one tree, parts of one tree, and I feel like that warrants thought on its own. I want to like just give that some thought. Yeah, Lauren?
Another thing, can I just add to?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I think like another cool thing about seeing wisdom, this like when you look at wisdom in this way, I think tefillah takes on like a new meaning. And I feel like I've also heard this idea maybe from quoted in the name of Rabbi Mann.
Yeah.
But that like to learn about God's oneness is one thing, but like all you have it really is like the time that you're learning in it. You're learning it.
Yeah.
But by like repeating it every day, you're kind of making that into your thoughts.
Okay.
And, like,
yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say that for. Okay, and not through. Okay, I was gonna say that. I don't remember who I was gonna say that for. So when we're gonna do at least 2 more meforshim, and if it doesn't come up, then I'll say I'll try to remember to comment on that. Yeah, Lauren.
I don't know if you ever read the book As a Driven Leaf. Have you ever
No.
read that book? Oh, it's a really good book. It's a fiction book, but it's basically like the story of Elisha ben Avuya.
Oh, I've heard people talk about it. I haven't read it though.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's kind of like about. I mean, it's based on Mishnahs and Gemaras and the God says, but it's like it makes it like as a story of how he like went off the derech, I guess. But anyway, a lot of those ideas brought out in that book, I feel like it's resonant in this Mishnah, and then it's called As a Driven Leaf. So It's like reminding me of the tree.
Right.
But anyway, I highly recommend. It's a really good read. I really
okay, good. It. All right, were you would say our book commercial for this for this class? Okay, good. Okay, so let's I think this is good for the Rambam. Let's go to okay, I'm a little in conflict here. All right, let's go to Rבינו Yona because that's what Vanessa was quoting. Okay, so Rבינו Yona gives several interpretations. All right, let's read through this. Is we've done this before. So if you want an in-depth thing on this, listen to our shiur on this from whatever date it was earlier this year. Okay, but we'll just refresh your memory and then see if we can apply it here. So Rבינו Yona says, R Chanina ben Dosa says, anyone whose fear of sin precedes his wisdom will endure. This was said regarding effort. One who strives to know wisdom so that he will know how to guard his soul against sin, and he becomes wise, his wisdom will endure with him, and he will consequently abstain from transgressions, and he will do mitzvos in accordance with what he has learned and comprehended. Anyone whose wisdom precedes his fear of sin, his wisdom will not endure. He did not make an initial effort to know wisdom in order to fulfill it, but only in order to understand and to comprehend. Therefore, it will not endure. And I remember being perplexed by this last time. He says, "V'hadin nosein," and the judgment is given. I don't know what he means by that. I don't know if he means that this guy will be punished, or if Rבינו Yona is saying like this is fact. I'm not sure exactly what he's getting at here. So that's Rבינו Yona on the first part. Then on our part, he says, anyone whose actions exceed his wisdom will endure. For when a person's actions exceed his wisdom, as a result, his desire for wisdom will be greater than his wisdom. Consequently, he will increase his wisdom each and every day. And anyone whose wisdom exceeds his actions, his wisdom will not endure. As a result, his desire for wisdom will be less than his wisdom. Consequently, his wisdom will continue to diminish. This is what the Rishonim explain. Now, this is before he raises Vanessa's point about the Nasa V'nishba. So do we get anything, I guess, like what's the idea here? I feel like these are very related. Yeah, Vanessa?
I mean, in the second part, he's saying something we haven't discussed before, which is really cool to me, that if you're not pursuing wisdom for Torah's sake and like for the purpose of doing it, and like if you're only doing it just for the sake of understanding more and more for your own gratification, you don't have an actual impulse to keep learning until like you get bored and distracted. But if you're like have your eye on the ball of like actually serving Hashem and like
right,
then you're gonna want to keep learning more, and the more you do, the more you learn. I'm like, wait, okay, I'm doing this Shema thing. Why am I doing this Shema thing? Okay, Hashem took us out of Egypt. Wait, why did he do that? Like,
yeah,
like that's the mitzvah thing. Like,
yeah,
and then it was different. But
that's a great depiction of it. Yeah, that's good. I'll give an example for me, and I'm Davka not tooting my own horn here, even though it's going to sound like it. I just got dealt a really good hand of Torah for my chelik in Torah. Is that because my Rebbe was Rabbi Moskowitz, and Rabbi Moskowitz's whole orientation towards Torah was practical application. So it turns out that like my primary drive in almost all the Torah that I learn is geared towards the practical. And I experience this is like I want to get stuff out of the mitzvahs that I do. Like I want to know how to like make good decisions. And so it's driven by wanting to implement it in a way that's beneficial. And what that does is it constantly like exposes gaps in my knowledge, because clearly I'm not living perfectly. So there must be some gap I need to fill. And so I'm constantly like trying to like fill those gaps. Whereas if I was just driven by the pursuit of knowledge, so that's great if you're living on the level of learning Lishma, and like you're over me'ava and you're serving God out of love, and you're just driven infinitely for knowledge. But most of us don't start off like that, So then it's just a question of like, what do you happen to be interested in? And you could just spend your whole day la-di-da-di-da learning lots of good Torah, but never really like making that connection to your practice. I think part of this also has to do with atomic habits of the identity. Like he's talking here about how his desire for wisdom will be greater than his wisdom. Yeah, why doesn't that happen to the other guy though? Like the guy who's involved in learning is also going to realize that he doesn't know as much as there is to know. Like that's like the Newton quote that I was like quoting, but like I was like a little boy on the seashore, picking up a shell here and there while the vast ocean of truth lay undiscovered before me. So seems like it is possible to get that in if you're doing it just for Chachma as well.
What's your question?
My question is, sorry, I transitioned from statement to question.
No, it's okay.
I was saying how I was starting to say that if your Chachma is attached to action, then that's going to like bring your identity into the picture, and wanting to like boost yourself and your identity is going to drive you towards Chachma in a way that you wouldn't get if you're just involved in the theoretical. Then I started thinking about the words, which say, when a person's actions exceed his wisdom, as a result, his desire for wisdom will be greater than his wisdom. And then the Rבינו says the opposite for the other guy, that as a result, his wisdom will be less than his desire for wisdom will be less than his wisdom, and his wisdom will diminish. My question there was, let's say you have a person who's just interested in theoretical knowledge, won't they sense that there's like way more wisdom out there than the wisdom that they know? And why won't that motivate them to like increase their wisdom? Yeah, Vanessa?
I think it might motivate them to increase their like knowledge, but not necessarily wisdom. I think this is where we have to get into the words like,
oh no, we have to define wisdom again.
Like, I think I can imagine, like, I'm really just imagining this guy from college, but like you see it a lot of places, like you want to learn more and more and like play devil's advocate and learn all the sides and whatever, but that's not like wisdom in the sense of like Torah knowledge. And like we need to define like Chachma more clearly. I think that's like what it's going to come down to. But I think the answer is like you can pursue like knowledge and wisdom all you want, but if it's not bringing you to concretizing it in action, you're not learning it for the right reasons.
Right. So in the first half of the Rבינו Yona, it seemed like wisdom that he was talking about is like just knowledge of the of the halakhic system,
Right.
And so I'm assuming that's what he means in the second part also. Let's do this.
Half of the first one, he says he didn't make an initial effort to know wisdom in order to fulfill it, but only in order to understand and comprehend. So like you can keep on
the theoretical aspect of the mitzvos. It's so he still is talking about things that are practical, but this guy is only learning, like you're saying, this guy's only learning like the Gemaras. He's not learning like the Shulchan Aruch to know what to do.
Is that what it's saying?
He's saying he did not make an initial effort to know wisdom in order to fulfill it, like the first guy.
Yeah.
But only in order to understand and to comprehend. But we are talking about something that is able to be fulfilled. So we're not talking, for example, about learning physics or learning metaphysics, because you can't fulfill that, So it does seem to be talking about knowledge of Torah here, of like mitzvos. Yeah, Tamar?
So I want to posit something for the second part, but I'm not sure if it's too far out. No, I'm not sure. Maybe it's both. Maybe this is like the labor-intensive facts. Is the thing that the person won't stick with, why would someone learn, let's say, the Shulchan Aruch or something, like, or even just like spend a lot of time gathering facts in an area, like maybe they have their eye on the ball for the intellectual satisfaction later, but like I think that the person has a different level of motivation if they are trying to, let's say, avoid sin,
right,
or do the mitzvahs properly.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I definitely think that the labor-intensive gathering of facts is part of this. I do think that it has to be talking about more than this because of that statement here of in order to understand and comprehend, but it definitely includes the facts. And Chachma means facts typically, like it means received knowledge. So like that's definitely in line with that also. Yeah, Vanessa?
I just wanted to corroborate that. I forget. Aren't there like a very specific set of non-Jews who like learn the Talmud religiously and like does anyone know what I'm talking about?
Are you talking about that news story in Korea that happened like in the 2000s?
It might be Korea. Yeah. I was thinking somewhere Eastern.
Yeah.
Like could we be talking about something like that, which like they're non-Jews, it's a little different, but like same idea of like they pursue the knowledge, but like they're not converting. Like there's not a bunch of Koreans who are like, yes, we like learned all this and like we're ready to come back to God. Like they're just like learning it for learning's sake, and they're learning facts, but they're not
right. Yeah, that definitely could be the case. I mean, I think more common examples within Judaism are people who learn just for the intellectual stimulation, or people who learn. There are people who like. I don't have firsthand familiarity with these people, but I've heard that they exist. Like that in certain Haredi or yeshiva circles, the learning of Gemara is almost like a religious activity as opposed to like gaining knowledge. Like doing the actions of learning is almost like doing the actions of davening, where it's like, it's not connected at all to like, self-improvement or becoming a better person. It's just like, it's a form of avoda, and obviously learning is a form of avoda, but not like saying the words and like, like you're saying, like chuckling over Gemara,
Right.
I think also, here's a question of how far this extends. I mean, you have two kind of contrary trends. Okay. You have in the yeshiva world up until, I don't know when it started, but up until Reb Chaim Soloveitchik and the Briskers, then the non-practical areas of Talmud were not learned. So let's say like the Korbanos stuff that we don't do nowadays was not learned because it's not practical. Okay. So like, and he opened it up back into the those areas as well. But then even in the practical areas, my understanding is that most Ashkenazi yeshivas, from what I'm told, don't learn, even when they learn the practical areas, they don't learn in order to paskin, like to know how this emerges in halacha. Whereas I think a lot of the Sephardic yeshivas, and then in our yeshiva here, then we do culminate in like how we apply this to halacha. I mean, my first exposure to this was in Rav Pesach's Gemara shiur, one of my first years of shiur, where he did Ketzan Mevarchin, which is about what brachas you say over food. And I remember like by the end of the year, we would be, like I remember the psak changed about what bracha you say on orange juice, and like other questions came up, and like we learn it to the practical, so I wonder if that other way also fits into this category. Like we're learning practical stuff, and of course we're going to keep practical stuff, but we're not exactly we're not bridging the gap between the theoretical and the practical. I don't know how far this goes. Yeah, Ayala?
Maybe the reason why that is because like the full satisfaction from the knowledge comes when it's like fully realized through like integration and activity too. So someone who's not learning, who's not like implementing the wisdom, or he's not like learning in order to implement, he's never gonna actually receive that full satisfaction, and then like his desire will eventually dry up because it's not being fed. Okay,
so that's a very halachic man idea. And it's also an idea that Rav Hirsch is going to say on our mishnah in a little while. Okay, so let's do this. Since I do want to end by 9:30 today, if possible. I want to read the part of the Rבינו Yona that Vanessa quoted. Okay, and again, we're not going to dwell on it because we gave another shiur on that. So I think we'll just read it just to refresh our memory. He says, "Oh, sorry, we didn't do something important though. The wind. So the wind here would be external forces that." Again, that like if your learning is not binding you to your actions, because that's not the purpose of your learning, then pretty much any external force that like threatens you is gonna like overwhelm you. And maybe the idea of uproot of like making the chachma a liability is your chachma was always theoretical anyway. It was never really like tied to what you actually do. So it's very easy for it to just be like, to be blown away by external circumstances, whereas if it's very connected to learning, like let's take an example. Let's take okay, I'm going to use a non-religious example. Let's say you have someone who is a chef, okay? And all of their knowledge of the culinary arts is tied to their practice of the culinary arts, okay? I don't care what happens to that person. Let's say like he stops, let's say like he can't, be involved in cooking anymore. I don't care. Anytime he cooks in the future, all of those habits are going to come back because his learning of the culinary arts is so connected to his practice of it. Okay. Same thing here. I was, one of my ninth graders asked me this question of like, if you, if you found out that God didn't exist, then would you still keep Judaism? So I gave a very nuanced answer to that. But one of the things I said in my answer is if I found out that Torah was false, I would still learn and practice mishnah. Like that's one thing. Like the ideas of mishnah are not going to change because I know, not only do I know that they're true, but they're so integrated to my conviction that living a beneficial life requires chachma, that like nothing can budge that, but that's because it's tied to action. But if someone convinced me that Judaism isn't true, would I continue learning Hilchos Brachos? No, I probably wouldn't. It's just going to fall by the wayside. So it has to be rooted in action. Okay, going on to what Vanessa was quoting. So now Rבינו Yona does the record screech and says, but one may ask, how is it possible for his deeds to exceed his wisdom? Right, specifically that direction. If he doesn't know the Torah and the mitzvot, can he even do these deeds? On what basis would he do them? So then he answers, rather, the Mishnah is telling us based on advice, which is good, beautiful, and acceptable for someone who doesn't know, okay, meaning someone who doesn't know Torah, that he shouldn't destroy his soul, which I assume means he shouldn't like just give up hope. Rather, he should accept upon himself to do all the things that those who are wise tell him and not deviate from them to the right or to the left, as they may known to him. And then he quotes the pasuk, according to the Torah that they instruct him and according to the judgment that they tell him he should do. That's a paraphrase. It's really al pi Torah Yerucha, that they tell you. Okay, fine. As soon as he accepts upon himself with a whole heart and a desirous soul, reward will be reckoned for him as though he fulfilled all the mitzvos. Regarding this path, they said, one whose deeds exceed his wisdom. For even what he doesn't know and doesn't do are considered his deeds because he has reward for them, as if he did them, based on acceptance. Likewise, it is explicitly stated in Avos to Rabbi Nassan, anyone whose deeds exceed his wisdom will endure, as it says, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and then we will listen. That Israel preceded doing to listening, when it should have said, we will listen and we will do, because before a person is able to do an action, he needs to listen to what to do. Rather, they initially accepted upon themselves everything that he would command them, and they listened, and immediately they received reward as if they did them. So what's interesting about this, and I don't know if I brought this up last time, Rבינו Yona is basically ditching, he's not invalidating the ideas, but he's saying that the Mishnah is talking to a person who doesn't have knowledge, okay, and saying you should just accept what the Chachamim say. What's interesting is that we've seen examples of ideas that are just for Hasidim in training, and we've seen examples that like can apply to everybody. This is the only example I've seen where he's saying this is talking to the guy who doesn't have Torah knowledge and saying he should just obey Chachamim. Interesting that that's in Avos. Yeah, Vanessa?
I really like this. When I became more religious, and I did this in an Ashke environment, I'm Sephardi, and a lot of people didn't understand that like I was religious before, even though I was wearing shorts and like only knew how to say bracho. And this is like a tangible way of saying that like I didn't know, but whatever I did know, right. I did. And I think it's more common with Sephardis. I think
so also.
What?
I think so also. That's what I've been told also. Sephardim are tend to be very good. I know we're stereotyping here. Very good with just like the obeying whatever it is the Chachamim tell them,
And it's not even just like obeying what Chachamim tell you. I think it's like a very deep conviction that like we don't, like the Reform movement started with Ashkenazim. Like we don't even, like I had a friend who was visiting Brandeis and was like trying out different minyanim because in Great Neck he goes to conservative shul. But it's a Sephardi shul. So conservative just means that he drives to shul. But at Brandeis, he would have to go to an Orthodox one because he was like, no, I don't understand. Like, why are they like sitting together? That's not a thing. Like, the understanding is so fundamentally different of like what being from is like. Yeah. Even like in my community, at least, I'm not going to speak for others, and I'm not going to like generalize. Like, obviously, Jews come in all different whatevers, but like every single Jew in my community keeps Yom Kippur 100,000%. Like, there's no question of like, oh, you don't. They know how to keep Yom Kippur, so they do it 100%. Whereas like in an Ashkenazi shul, like you'll have people who like won't fast or won't do like they'll do different things, which is like fine. It's just like a completely different approach to like what it means to keep halacha and how to approach Judaism. Like, the Sephardi Jew might not have all the knowledge, especially like my community came from like crypto Jews. Like we didn't have a lot of education when we were pretending to be Muslim for 400 years. Like we didn't have much that lasted, but whatever lasted, we like did with like full kavana.
Right. Yeah. This is the type of question that if I ever get someone who is very knowledgeable about Torah and very knowledgeable about Jewish history, and maybe if they get a little bit of alcohol in them so that they're willing to like make statements that aren't like scholarly, I would ask them, is this the Ashkenazic problem, or not Ashkenaz, is this like the European Jewry problem that led to the rise of conservative of reform? Like, is it the problem of having their chachma more than their actions? Like kind of like diagnosing this from a Torah mistake framework. Like I'd be curious. I don't have enough knowledge of Torah or history to say that, but the observations you're making ring true to me, but I don't know what the value is of that. Yeah, Ayala?
This is very like off topic, so you can not answer it if you like. But what practical like implications do you think this has for a high school education?
Yeah.
Where people aren't necessarily going to be keeping, like, do you increase their wisdom?
Yeah. That I want to think about.
What's the question?
And
The
specifically,
question is like in a high school environment, you're saying a high school environment where people are not keeping halacha necessarily, right? Yeah. So then, like, should you increase their wisdom, or is that going to like make them prone to this problem? You know, I'll give my gut answer. Okay, is we are in a situation of like Ace Lasos Lashem, almost of like, you know, we can't stop, we can't afford to teach in an idealized way. We need to just focus on getting kids as much Jewish knowledge and identity as possible and hoping that they turn out well. That's my intuition, but I can't justify it. I want to make sure that we just get to the Meiri, okay? And then if we have time, we'll take more questions. But Meiri is a good one here. So last line in Rבינו Yona, which again we did in the other shiur earlier in the year. Anyone whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, etc., says that a person shouldn't say, "I will learn this halacha and then fulfill it," or "I will learn the entire Talmud and then fulfill it." If he says this, his wisdom will not endure, for he needs to improve his midos first, and afterwards his wisdom will endure. I think this is explained in light of what we already said, but this is just like the extreme version of it, of like, I'm not going to do it till I understand it. Like, we'll, you know, take that Eric Zimmer quote again, that the what did I say? I'm not going to look it up again. You know, but like that's not how it works. What works is you get into the habits that reflect the ideas, and then they come. Oh, now this is where I want to deploy my my analogy of what Ayala was saying earlier, or someone was saying earlier. That two examples. One is, you know, we hold by Yichud Hashem, by God's oneness, okay? And that's a philosophical idea, okay? But how much would you actually think about Yichud Hashem if you didn't have the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, you know? Or another example, which is more relatable, is, you know, Yetzias Mitzrayim happened once in history, okay? The Mun happened for 40 years, okay? What do you think about more? You think about Yetzias Mitzrayim more. Why? Because we have dozens of mitzvahs that remind us of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And arguably, I can only think of one mitzvah that reminds us of the Mun, and it's not even a mitzvah. It is a, like, you know, halachic derech eretz / like derabanan to have 2 loaves on Shabbos to remind us of the double portion, you know. But like arguably that was like a more a miracle with a greater magnitude. Like that sustained a nation for 40 years, you know, whatever. So like, the doing of the mitzvos not only does it, you know, do we have all the points that we made, but like someone said earlier, it keeps it in your consciousness. And the only reason why we like delve into understanding Yichud Hashem and delve into understanding the Yetzias Mitzrayim is because we have these mitzvos that drag us into those ideas, you know, all the time. Okay, here's the Meiri now. Now Meiri does explain our mishnah. He says, R Elazar ben Azaryah made a separate statement. Anyone whose wisdom exceeds his deeds, one who's perfected in his wisdom. Now, I don't think it means like 100% perfect. It means like he's highly developed in his wisdom, but isn't meticulous with mitzvahs to do them to the extent of meticulousness they warrant, is comparable to a tree whose branches are numerous but whose roots are few, that a slight wind comes and uproots it. For fear of Hashem is the root of wisdom, and one should not cast off the fear of Hashem from upon himself, as we have explained. But one whose deeds exceed his wisdom is the opposite, for he is similar to a tree whose roots are numerous but whose branches are few, that even if all the winds in the world come, they will not budge it from its place. The metaphor is saying that no strategy, okay, and keep me reminding the word strategy for a second, can prevent this person from being among those who fear Hashem, that even when he is presented with philosophical proofs which he doesn't know how to refute, even when he is presented with philosophical proofs which he doesn't know how to refute. In my opinion, I'm gonna skip this part. All right, I'll read it, but okay. In my opinion, he says this is the meaning of the pasuk in Mishlei 5:6, which is, lest you weigh the path of life for yourself, her courses wander, you cannot know, as we explained in our general preface to this work. So that's in the Hakdama to the Base of Bechira, which I don't have a copy of. So I read the footnote in my English version. It says, Meiri there explains that the path of life is the fulfillment of Torah and mitzvos, which lead to Hashem. If a person thinks that he can only believe what he can prove with the measuring scales of his own mind, then he may come to heresy. For the courses of rational thought wander and are elusive. Our Mishnah teaches that if one's connection to Torah is deeply rooted in fear of heaven, then his belief is firm and cannot be swayed with mere rational arguments, compelling as they may be. So I'll tell you what I like about the Meiri. What I like about it is I think it's the smoothest reading of his wisdom exceeds his deeds, which is that if you know, let's say you know 100% of Hilchos Shabbos, but you only keep 70% of it, then your wisdom exceeds your deeds. Your deeds don't match up to your wisdom, you know? But then if your deeds exceed your wisdom, that sounds like what Rבינו Yona was saying, where practically speaking, your deeds can't exceed your wisdom. But what it must mean is that you are firmly committed to the actions, even when they're not stemming from like firsthand knowledge, you know? And that's what he's calling fear of Hashem. I know he says it's midos, but like I think that's what he's talking about fear of Hashem. Now, what we need to analyze is what the two clauses have to do with each other, and then what exactly the threat of the wind is. I'm telling you, I'm fading fast. I was like mustering up the adrenaline for this. I just want to read the Rav Hirsch, and then I want to call it a night, and we can continue discussing this in the chat. But my mind is just like totally shot now. It was a very long week. Okay, so Rav Hirsch says something that reminded me of what one of you said earlier. I think what Ayala said. Let's see. Let's find out. This verse is a continuation. Oh, so this is Rav Hirsch on the R Chanina ben Dosa mishnah. Okay, he didn't say much on our mishnah. This verse is a continuation and supplement of what has gone before. Here we are told there are also persons who, though having adopted the right approach to the study of Torah, nevertheless shall never attain true and enduring wisdom. Such a person may indeed have sought help in enriching and improving his understanding and guidance for his life's duty from the Torah, but in practical life, he lacks the strength to translate the knowledge of what is right into proper conduct. His wisdom cannot endure. Such a man may know what his duty is, but if he does not perform it in practice, or at least not to the extent to which he knows he should be doing it, and thus is rich in wisdom but poor in deeds, his wisdom has no permanence. Okay, this is the line. It is stunted because it does not reach that stage of bloom and fruition in which it must be proven and in which alone it can attain its true worth and value. Accordingly, our sages have also said elsewhere, Limud gadol shehalimud mived lidei ma'aseh. Study is great because study leads to deeds. Or lo hamidrash ikar el hamaseh. The main thing is not inquiry but deeds. So this is, you know, partially halachic man, partially like what I was saying about Mishle, is that like, you know, unless you can like bridge that gap and put your wisdom into action, then you don't really know whether the wisdom is firm. And my example of this, and I know I've said this example before, is when I went to graduate school for Jewish education, my first half of my grad school classes, I took the classes before I was in the classroom. So I learned stuff, but then once I was in the classroom and I actually was like in a position to implement what I was teaching, immediately it was like, okay, this works. And like, I need to develop it more by this and this and this. And this thing is a great theory, but it just doesn't work at all. So I could just, you know, so it like really like it put it to the test. And same thing in Mishle, when you have a real world example that you see it happen in real life, like that's really bringing it to fruition, and also makes it more real to you that that you're like, you know, embodying it and implementing it. Okay. I don't even have enough energy to review what we were doing. I think the question that was asked about someone asked a practical question. Oh yeah, I asked a question about like high schoolers and the education there. I think we need to develop that. So okay, in terms of just, we're gonna review the review, but not actually review. Okay, we had a good idea of the Rambam. I think the only solid interpretation we had for everything is the Rambam, which we reviewed what he said for R Chanina ben Dosa, and then extended it to the threat of the wind, and it was one unified idea. We talked about Rבינו Yona and having this like top-heavy approach where you focus too much on the theoretics. But then we read the other part of the Rבינו Yona, which we have to review about the like Naaseh v'Nishba part. I didn't really get that. And then the Meiri has a clean interpretation of wisdom exceeding deeds. And he has a nice interpretation of deeds exceeding wisdom, but I don't see them as like opposites exactly. So we need to unify that. And then if you could integrate the Yirmiyahu psukim, then Harizeh Meshubach. But that's another thing. Also, just so you know, in case you ever do this on your own, the Abravanel does try to explain the Yirmiyahu thing. And not only that, but in classic Abravanel style, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions on our Mishnah. And I don't think we asked any of them. Okay, so he has 7 more questions on our Mishnah. And then he has a long answer This is just his answer, his explanation for our Mishnah, but he weaves the entire Chanina Mendoza, the entire Elazar ben Azaryah thing together with the Kemach and stuff. It's pages of commentary. I just didn't have the time and patience to read through it, but it's there for you if you want it. I am happy to continue the discussion in the chat, but I am shot for tonight. So good shiur. Thanks for learning. Good shiur, I'm saying for the group. It was a great good group effort tonight. Next week, no Pirkei Avos because of Thanksgiving, and we have one more mishnah after that. So God willing, we'll do that, and no Machshava Lab tomorrow, because I'm glad I made this new policy, Connecticut thing. I have not even started my Friday article. I have not had energy to do anything, but we at least we learned tonight. Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.